Jaya stood on the balcony of her high-rise apartment, gazing out at the bustling city below. It was a cold autumn evening, and the air was tinged with the scent of fallen leaves. She glanced at the neighboring apartment, where an old woman named Mrs. Patel lived alone. Mrs. Patel was a mysterious figure in the building, rarely seen outside of her dimly lit home. However, she frequently visited Jaya, bearing gifts of cakes and food. The food always looked a little off, with a musty odor that made Jaya's stomach churn. She politely accepted the offerings but never dared to take a bite. One stormy evening, a knock echoed through Jaya's apartment. Reluctantly, she opened the door to find Mrs. Patel standing there, her eyes filled with a sinister glint. "I thought we could have tea together tonight," the old woman said, her voice dripping with an otherworldly tone. Jaya's heart pounded in her chest, but she couldn't resist the old woman's forceful invitation. Paralyzed with fear, she led Mrs. Patel into her living room, where the tea sat waiting. The room grew colder, and an eerie silence settled over them. As they sipped their tea, Jaya felt a surge of fear course through her veins. She realized too late that Mrs. Patel had placed her under a spell. Her body became rigid, unable to move or scream for help. The room warped and twisted, and Jaya watched in horror as Mrs. Patel's skin began to fall off, revealing a grotesque, otherworldly form beneath. With each moment that passed, the demon crawled out of Mrs. Patel's decaying body and into Jaya's. The pain was excruciating, as if her very soul was being torn apart. She wanted to beg for mercy, but her lips were sealed shut. All she could do was watch as the demon completed its unholy possession. Finally, Mrs. Patel collapsed inanimate and dead on the floor, her body a vessel drained of life. Jaya, now under the complete control of the demon, silently carried the old woman's lifeless form back to her apartment, tucking her into bed. No one suspected foul play, for they believed that Mrs. Patel had died of natural causes. From that day forward, Jaya's life became a twisted charade. The demon possessed her every thought and action, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the moment when the human form would wither away. Friends and family saw no signs of the dark presence that had taken hold of her. But in the dead of night, Jaya would revel in the darkness, feeding the demon's numerous desires. Days turned into years, and Jaya grew old, her body frail and feeble. The demon, however, thrived within her, biding its time until the day it would need a new body to inhabit, and the search for its next victim was on.